Dear students, today's class is on treatment of periodontal management of medically compromised patients and older adults. The learning outcomes for today's class are: list 5 major systemic disease that has its impact on periodontium, explain the management of patients with cardiovascular problems, discuss about pregnancy and its implications, describe other potential systemic disease and its effective management, name 5 changes in periodontium of older adults along with their management. So coming on to the systemic diseases, what are have the impact or requires some modification in periodontal treatment are cardiovascular diseases, endocrine diseases, hemorrhagic diseases, renal diseases, liver diseases, pulmonary diseases, medications and cancer therapy, prosthetic joint replacement, pregnancy and infectious diseases. We'll see one by one. We'll start with cardiovascular disease. The most frequent cardiovascular disease are hypertension, ischemic heart disease, congestive heart failure, cardiac pacemakers and implantable defibrillators, infective endocarditis and cerebrovascular accident. We'll start with hypertension. What are all the modifications we are going to do in dental treatment or periodontal treatment for patients with hypertension? Based on JNC guidelines, the patients have been classified into normal, prehypertensive, stage 1 hypertension and stage 2 hypertensive. For normal patients, prehypertensive patients and stage 1 hypertensive patients, there is no need of any change in dental treatment. But for prehypertensive patients and stage 1 hypertensive patients, you need to monitor the BP every appointments when the patients come. But for a stage 2 hypertensive patients where the systolic blood pressure is more than 160 and diastolic blood pressure is more than 100, you have to monitor the BP on each appointment. If patients requires any selective dental procedures, then the systolic BP should be less than 180 and diastolic should be less than 110. If the systolic is more than 180 and diastolic is more than 100, then you cannot do any selective procedures. You can do only emergency procedures to alleviate pain or bleeding. So for hypertensive patients, what are all the modifications we are going to do is, you have to give patients appointments during the afternoon times because the blood pressure levels will be lower during the afternoon appointments. So afternoon time is the preferred time for giving appointments for patients with hypertensions. When treating hypertensive patients, when patients requires an local anesthesia, try to give a local anesthesia without an vasoconstrictor, or give a vasoconstrictor which is less than 1 in 1 lakh. So don't give any vasoconstrictor greater than 1 in 1 lakh concentration. Right? Administer the local anesthesia containing epinephrine to patients taking non-selective beta blockers can increase the blood pressure. So you have to be more cautious while administering local anesthesia with epinephrine for patients with hypertensives. And you cannot give any intraligamentary injections for patients with hypertension because these intraligamentary injections will mimic an intravascular injections and increases the blood pressure. Another problem will be a postural hypertension, which is common and which can be minimized by slowing your position changes during your dental chair movement. So slowly change the patients from supine to erect position or erect to supine position in the dental chair if the patient is an hypertensive, to prevent any postural hypertension or hypotension. Depression is one of the side effects of the medications taken by the patients for hypertension. So you have to be aware of this and you have to handle such patients more gently than more aggressively. Next possible cardiovascular disease is ischemic heart disease. The ischemic heart disease which going to impact on our periodontal treatment are angina pectoris and myocardial infarction. So what are all the modifications we may need to do for angina patients? Mostly the angina patients will getting an sublingual nitroglycerin for their anginal attack. So you advise the patient to bring the nitroglycerin along with them during the dental appointments. So the most frequently the type of nitroglycerin given is either a subgingival drug delivery agent or a sublingual spray formulation. So ask the patient to bring the tablet or the spray along with them for the dental treatment. And restrict the use of local anesthesia which contains vasoconstrictor. The next ischemic heart disease is myocardial infection. If the patient is having a history of myocardial infection which was within last 6 months, don't do any dental treatment, because the peak mortality happens within the first 6 months after the myocardial infection attack. So don't perform any dental treatment within the first 6 months. If the patient requires any dental treatment, it can be done only after 6 months of the initial attack. Right? So how to manage patients if there is an anginal attack during your dental treatment? If the patient having an anginal attack, since we have already told that the patient should bring their medications along with them if there is an history of angina pectoris. So if there is an anginal attack during the procedure, discontinue the periodontal procedure, administer sublingual nitroglycerin, either the tablet or the spray, and reassure the patient and examine the patient within the 3 minutes. The symptoms and signs should stop. If the symptoms and signs stops within 3 minutes, you can continue the procedure and try to finish the procedure as soon as possible, and reassure to find out whether the patient is comfortable before finishing the treatment, and you can send the patient. If the patient symptoms and signs does not resolve within that 3 minutes, you have to administer second dose of nitroglycerin. After administering the second dose of nitroglycerin, you have to monitor the patient's vitals, vital signs, call the patient's physicians, and you should be ready to be accompanied the patient for emergency care. If the second dose of nitroglycerin also not responded within the 3 minutes, you have to start given the third dose of nitroglycerin, and immediately you have to move the patient to an emergency medical facility. If the patient does not respond to second dose, give third dose and move the patient to the emergency care immediately. Next cardiovascular disease is congestive heart failure. This is a condition where the heart cannot able to pump adequate amount of oxygenated blood for the body's requirement. So the patients with poorly controlled or uncontrolled congestive heart failures are not the candidates for any periodontal treatment or any elective dental treatment. If the patient is a controlled patient, then you can perform elective treatment, but more cautions. You have to be cautious about the orthopnea given by the patients, because the presence of orthopnea in some congestive heart patients, you have to be more cautious when adjusting your dental chair, and make sure the patient in a comfortable position rather than putting the patient in a supine position for your dental treatment. And try to have a short appointments and reduce the stress with profound local anesthesia or possibly use of conscious sedations and supplementary oxygens to perform the procedure. Next thing is cardiac pacemakers and implanted defibrillators. If the patient is having a cardiac pacemakers, you have to find out whether it is a shielded one or a non-shielded one. The older cardiac pacemakers are unipolar and non-shielded one, which will interfere with your electromagnetic and electrical field. So you cannot use any electrical instrument or electromagnetic instrument in such patients. If the patient is using a bipolar or a shielded cardiac pacemakers, then there won't be any major effect, but you have to be more cautious, not try to use the electrical instrument more nearer to the cardiac pacemakers, or don't cross your electrical instruments over the cardiac pacemaker. Try to use it away from the patient pacemakers. Another possible problem you will see in cardiovascular disease is implanted cardiac defibrillators. Automatic cardiac defibrillators which was implanted to the patients, you have to be more cautious while doing the treatment, because if there is a sudden movement or the patient goes for defibrillation, the patient may get hurt or you may get hurt because of the patient's sudden movement. So you have to stabilize the patient during the treatment, either by using a bite block or other devices to prevent any unexpected trauma during the procedure. Next possible cardiovascular disease is infective endocarditis. It is one of the serious disease with poor prognosis. So infective endocarditis prophylaxis should be recommended for cardiovascular conditions with high risk of adverse outcomes of infective endocarditis. If the patient have undergone any cardiovascular surgery and you expect that there is a possibility of infective endocarditis, then you have to go for infective endocarditis prophylaxis. For example, a patient who is gone for a bypass surgery and stent is placed in the cardiovascular system, then you have to be more cautious and given infective endocarditis prophylaxis to prevent any infective endocarditis. Antibiotic prophylaxis is recommended for all dental procedures that involves manipulation of gingival tissue, periapical tissue, or any perforation to the oral mucosa. Non-invasive procedures doesn't require any antibiotic prophylaxis. For example, scaling. A normal scaling will induce bacteremia, but the bacteremia induced by scaling is almost equal to the amount of bacteremia induced by daily brushing. So daily toothbrushing will also induce bacteremia, so you don't need to give any antibiotic prophylaxis for just doing a scaling. But if you are doing a root planing or more invasive procedures like periodontal surgery or periapical surgeries, then you have to give an antibiotic prophylaxis before the procedures. Instruments like oral irrigators are generally not recommended for patients with possibility of myocardial infarction or infective endocarditis, and this is because the patient the irrigators will induce bacteremia, which is more higher. The bacteria can enter the bloodstream and it can go and implant on the cardiovascular walls and induce infective endocarditis. So don't use such instruments in patients with the possibility of infective endocarditis. Patients with aggressive periodontitis who should be given prophylactic treatment with antibiotics like tetracycline 250 milligrams 4 times daily for 14 days to eliminate the amount of bacteria present or reduce the amount of Actinobacterium aggregatibacter Actinomycetum commitans. Pre-treatment chlorhexidine rinse are recommended before all dental procedures to reduce the number of visits required and allow at least 7 days between each and every appointment. Regular recall appointments with an emphasis on oral hygiene reinforcement and maintenance of periodontal health are extremely important for patients who are susceptible for infective endocarditis. Next cardiovascular problem is cerebrovascular accident. A physician referral should be preceded the periodontal treatment if there is a signs and symptoms of early cerebrovascular insufficiency is evident. So long-term chlorhexidine rinse may generally aid in patients' plaque control, and no periodontal therapy should be performed for 6 months because of high risk of recurrence during this period. If the patient having a history of cerebrovascular accident, don't perform any periodontal therapy for the first 6 months. After the 6 months, periodontal therapy may be performed using a short appointments, and concentration of vasoconstrictor with greater than 1 in 1 lakh is contraindicated. You can use and local anesthesia without epinephrine, or a concentration of epinephrine which is less than 1 in 1 lakh. And supplementary oxygen is indicated to maintain the thorough cerebral oxygenation. Stroke patients are frequently placed on oral anticoagulants, so you should be careful on treating such patients if you are planning for any surgical management. BP should be monitored on every appointment. Next systemic disease is endocrine diseases. Endocrine diseases, most frequently we have to more caution are diabetes, thyroid and adrenal. Diabetes, we'll see one by one. The diabetes patients require special precautions before periodontal therapy. Usually diabetes is one of the major factor for increase in periodontal disease, and periodontal disease is one of the factor for increase in glycemic level. So periodontal therapy has limited success in patients with undiagnosed or poorly controlled diabetes mellitus. An HbA1c level of less than 10% should be present before any surgical therapy is performed for patients with diabetes. A tetracycline antibiotic in combination with oral prophylaxis have been shown to be improve the levels of glycemic control in patients with diabetes. So periodontal treatment can improve the levels of diabetic or the glycemic levels, and control in the glycemic level can improve periodontal disease status also. So both vice versa positively impact on each other. If one get treated, the other will get treated. So the most common dental office complications you will see in diabetic patient is hypoglycemic shock. The patient may have hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia does not usually occurs until the blood sugar level goes below 60 milligrams. So hypoglycemia is more common in patients with better controlled diabetic patients rather than an uncontrolled diabetic patients. Controlled diabetic patients will be more under either insulin or oral hypoglycemic drugs, which made them to be in a controlled level of glucose. During a dental treatment, the glucose levels still go down, which results in hypoglycemia. So you have to be more caution when treating an controlled diabetic patients rather than an uncontrolled diabetic patient. When planning a dental treatment, it is better to schedule the appointments before or after the peak insulin levels. The hypoglycemia is having a greater risk in patients who are taking insulin injections. Patients with insulin injections have greater risk of going for hypoglycemia rather than an oral hypoglycemic drugs. Oral hypoglycemic drugs are very less commonly involved in hypoglycemic shock. So when treating diabetic patients, so you have to use the patient's glucometer to check the levels of glucose before the treatment, during the treatment and after the treatment, so that you can have a better knowledge on how much the glucose level have been altered during the treatment. If there is an hypoglycemic attack during the procedure, administer the patient with 15 grams of oral carbohydrates if the patient is conscious and able to take the carbohydrates orally. You can give glucose 15 grams of oral carbohydrates to the patient. If the patient is unconscious or cannot able to take the oral drug, then you have to give an 25 to 30 ml of 50% dextrose intravenously, or you have to give 1 milligrams of glucagon intravenously or 1 milligram of glucagon intramuscularly or subcutaneously. This is to bring back their sugar levels so that the patient will come back from the hypoglycemic shock. So when you are planning for treating such patients, advise the patient to eat their normal meal before the dental treatment. Patients taking insulin without eating is the primary cause for hypoglycemia. So a well controlled diabetic patients who is going for a routine periodontal treatment may take their normal levels of insulin dose as long as they also eat their normal meal. If you think the procedure is going to be a prolonged procedure or longer duration procedure, then you have to think about reducing the dose of insulin before the procedure. Next systemic disease is thyroid and parathyroid disease. Periodontal treatment requires very minimal alterations in patients with controlled thyroid diseases. If the patient is uncontrolled or thyrotoxicosis, then you have to first treat the medical condition before you treat the patient for periodontal therapy. So don't give any periodontal therapy for patients with uncontrolled thyroid levels, either hyperthyroid or hypothyroid. First let the patient take the treatment for thyrotoxicosis, then you can treat the patient for periodontal problems. Next possible systemic disease is adrenaline insufficiency. Acute adrenaline insufficiency is associated with the significant mortality and morbidity as a result of peripheral vascular collapse or cardiac arrest in patients with histories of primary adrenal insufficiency Addison's disease or secondary adrenaline insufficiency where they are taking a corticosteroids. If you are going to give any extensive dental treatment for such patients who are undergoing any steroid therapy, you have to consult the physician about the indication for whether to determine the patient requires the treatment or you need to modify the steroid levels before the treatment. Individuals who may be at the risk of adrenal crisis require supplementations, including those who are undergoing lengthy major surgical procedures. Most of the time you have to increase the dose of the steroids taken by the patients, either 2 to 4 fold you have to increase the dosage for the patient before the treatment, that to prevent the adrenal crisis. Basically the glucocorticosteroids coverage regime varies, but most provides a 2 to 4 fold increase in the coverage. Management of patients in acute adrenal insufficiency crisis: if the patient undergoes an adrenal insufficiency during the dental procedures, terminate the procedure, ask for medical assistance, give oxygen, monitor the patient's vitals, place the patient in supine position and administer 100 milligrams of hydrocortisone either intravenously or intramuscularly, and you have to move the patient to the emergency ward immediately. The next possible systemic disease is hemorrhagic disease, either coagulation disorder, thrombocytopenic purpura, non-thrombocytopenic purpura, blood dyskaryosis, leukemia or agranulocytosis. We'll see one by one. Coagulation disorders. Probing, scaling and prophylaxis can be usually done without any medical modifications. So you don't need to modify any drugs or any medical modification is required for your normal procedures, non-invasive dental procedures. Anti-hemostatic agents such as oxidized cellulose or purified bovine collagens may be placed over the surgical site, and antifibrinolytic agents can be used to prevent or inhibit initial clot dissolution. You can use such things to prevent or the clot dissolution during your surgical treatment. Anticoagulant medications. This is one of the cause for coagulation disorders. The most common cause for abnormal coagulation may be the drug. Mostly these drugs have an impact on vitamin K or vitamin K antagonistic drugs, which is going to depress or decrease the production of vitamin K or the coagulating factors like 2, 7, 9 and 10. So infiltration anesthesia, scaling and root planing may be safely done if the patient INR value is less than 3. If you want to perform any minor surgical procedures, then you have to establish an INR value which is less than 2 to 2.5 before you proceed for any minor periodontal procedures. If you want any complex surgical procedures, then the INR values, international normalization ratio, should be less than 1.5 to 2 before you proceed for the procedure. Often the anticoagulant is discontinued for 2 to 3 days before the periodontal treatment, and the INR is checked on the day of the therapy. Next is antiplatelet medications. Aspirin is one of the antiplatelet medication which is normally given for patients who are hypertensive. For hypertension, most of the cases they will give aspirin as one of the drug. So if the patient is taking aspirin, there are possibility of antiplatelet activity. So you have to see the values with whether how much is the amount of antiplatelet drug aspirin taken by the patient. If the patient is taking a dosage which is less than 325 milligrams per day, then you don't need any modifications in your treatment, because it is not going to affect that much on antiplatelet or platelet activity. The platelet activity will be normal. If the patient is using a dosage more than 325 milligrams per day, then you have to think about modifying the aspirin levels. Either you have to stop the drug for 7 to 10 days before the surgical therapy. Next is renal diseases. Renal failure may result in severe electrolyte imbalance, cardiac arrhythmia, pulmonary congestion, congestive heart failure, and prolonged bleeding. So you have to need some modifications for your procedures. Check the lab values, the partial thromboplastin time, prothrombin time, bleeding time, and platelet counts before you do any procedure. Eliminate areas of oral infection to prevent any systemic infections. Drugs that are nephrotoxics or metabolized by the kidney should be avoided. You should not administer or give any medications which is metabolized by the kidney. Local anesthesia such as lidocaine are generally safe, so you can use local anesthesia in such patients. The following recommendations are made for those receiving hemodialysis. If the patient is having hemodialysis, screen the patients for hepatitis B and C, antigen and antibody. Provide antibiotic prophylaxis to prevent endarthritis or arteriovenous fistula or stent. Periodontal treatment should be provided on the day after the dialysis. Protect the hemodialysis shunt or fistula. BP should be monitored on the other arm. If you are planning to monitor the BP for the patient, use the other arm where the hemodialysis stent is not there. Usually these patients who are under hemodialysis, they will be having their fistula or the shunt, not the shunt, the how to say, the IV line will be there on the hand, because they will go for frequent hemodialysis. Once in 2 days or once in 3 days they will go for hemodialysis, so they will be having their IV line intact while coming for the treatment. So you have to take the BP on the other side of the hand rather than taking the BP on the side of hand where they are having the IV line, right? So why we want to do a periodontal treatment after the day of dialysis? Because after the day of dialysis the blood will be more pure, so that the patient can able to manage the infection after the treatment. That is the idea of doing the treatment after the day of dialysis. Next, disease is liver disease. The liver disease is the site of liver is the site of production of most of the clotting factors. So there will be excessive bleeding during or after the periodontal therapy if the patient is having a severe liver disease. So the treatment recommendations for these patients with liver disease include consult with the physician concerning the current status of the disease, risk of bleeding, potential drug to be prescribed during the treatment, and requires alterations in the periodontal therapy. During the treatment, screen for hepatitis B and C, check the laboratory values for prothrombin time and partial thromboplasmin time, check the laboratory values for INR, International Normalization Ratio. So if all these are normal, then you can proceed with the treatment. Next systemic disease is pulmonary disease. The following guidelines should be used for pulmonary disease. In patients with known pulmonary disease, consult with the physician regarding the medications. Avoid eliciting of respiratory distress or depressions. Minimize the stress of the periodontal appointments. The patients with emphysema should be treated in the afternoon, several hours after the sleep, to avoid for any airway obstructions. Avoid medications that could cause respiratory depressions. Avoid bilateral mandibular blocks which can prevent or obstruct the airway. Position the patient to allow maximum ventilation. These are the precautions you have to take when treating patients with pulmonary disease. In patients with asthma, if the patient having a history of asthma, advise the patient to bring their medication along with them. Most of the time the patient will be using an inhaler for asthmatic attack. So ask the patient to bring the inhaler along with them for the treatment. If the patient is having any active fungal or bacterial respiratory disease, don't treat the patient until the active disease subsides. Once the bacterial or fungal disease subsides, then only we can provide periodontal treatment. Next possible medical condition is medications and cancer therapy. So for cancer patients, you frequently see patients using bisphosphonates, anticoagulants, antiplatelets, corticosteroids, immunosuppressants, and radiations. These are the things during cancer therapy we will see. So we will see one by one what are all the modifications we require. For chemotherapy patients, if periodontal therapy is needed during chemotherapy, it is better to be done before chemotherapy is given, because after chemotherapy the WBC level will go down. So you have to treat the patient before the chemotherapy so that the WBC level will be relatively high, so that the patient can encounter infection and have a better results of treatment if you are providing the treatment before the chemotherapy. If you planning to give treatment after chemotherapy, it will be difficult. The patient cannot able to cope up with your dental treatment. So the dental treatment should be done when the WBC count is above 2000 per millimeter cube and with an absolute granulocyte count of 1000 to 1500 millimeter cube. Next is infectious diseases. The infectious diseases are hepatitis, HIV, and tuberculosis. We'll see one by one. Hepatitis patients. If the patient is hepatitis, regardless of the type of disease, if it is active, do not provide any periodontal treatment. With a past history of hepatitis, consult the physician to determine the type of hepatitis, course and length of the disease, mode of transmission, and any chronic liver disease or viral carrier status. For recovered hepatitis B patients, you can treat the patients like a routine patient. So for recovered patients, consult the physician and order for hepatitis B antigen and antibody test. If the hepatitis B antigen and antibody test are negative, but you suspect the patient is hepatitis B positive, you order for one more hepatitis B determination. Patient who are with hepatitis antigen positive, probably an infected, or probably a carrier. So don't treat such patients. The degree of infectivity is more, so you cannot treat patients with positive hepatitis antigen. Patients who are antibody positive can be treated normally, and patients who are antigen negative may be treated normally. For patients with hepatitis C, consult the patient's physician to determine the patient's risk for transmissibility and current status of chronic liver disease. If patient with active hepatitis and requires treatment, so you have to follow some precautions. Consult the physician regarding the status. If the bleeding is likely during or after treatment, measure the prothrombin time and bleeding time. Hepatitis may alter coagulation and change treatment accordingly. So all personals in the clinics who are going to be in contact with the patient should use a barrier technique. A PPE should be used, including mask, gloves, glass or eye shields, and disposable gowns should be used. Use as many disposable covers as possible, covering light handles, drawers and brackets. Minimize the aerosol production by not using ultrasonic instruments, air syringe or high speed handpiece. Remember that saliva contains a distillated virus, so try to protect yourself by using a double gloving. So pre-rinse with chlorhexidine gluconate for 30 seconds is highly recommended. When the procedure is complete, all equipment should be scrubbed and sterilized. If the instrument cannot be sterilized, you have to dispose the instrument. Next is periodontal treatment of patients with older adults. Adult patients 65 years of age or older, you have to consider the factor that older patients are medically or mentally, the patient's medical and mental health status, medications, functional status, lifestyle behavior that influence periodontal treatment outcome or progression of disease. Periodontal disease severity, ability to perform oral hygiene procedures and ability to tolerate treatment should be evaluated during the treatment planning. For older adults, a non-surgical approach is better than a surgical approach. For patients with 65 years, you don't need to go for an aggressive periodontal treatment. You can maintain the patient with a non-surgical management. So for maintaining older adults, there is a separate specialty available with, in the dental disciplinary, which is called as geriatric dentistry. So to summarize, a common goal for all older patients is to decrease the bacteria throughout the oral better oral hygiene maintenance and mechanical debridement. You don't need to do any aggressive treatment. Evaluate the medically compromised status and treat patients based on their medical conditions. So if the patient is having any systemic disease, you have to evaluate the systemic disease, the condition of the systemic disease, and take necessary precautions before treating periodontal disease for patients with systemic disease. Thank you.